Hey everybody, this is Josh McKinney, and I just want to welcome you to episode 120 of the I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu show. I want to start out today with a little bit of a disclaimer. Normally I don't do these, but if you're a vegan or maybe you think pretty vegan, I would skip the first 7 minutes of this interview, and then we'll just leave it at that. You've been warned. If you're into the vegan stuff, if you are into animals have feelings too, I would skip the first 7 minutes of this episode. You've been warned. But the next part of the episode, the rest of the episode is actually super, super good. Just learning jiu-jitsu content. And you know, it's very much full of stories from the past with Kyle and I. Kyle and I have a unique relationship. Kyle's been my coach for 14 years, and not many people are still with their first coach after 10 years, and very few people have only kept one coach for such a long time. And so that means Kyle and I have this really cool history together, and we kind of get into that in this episode. Before we jump into the episode, I just wanted to tell you guys a fun story about how Kyle is doing. This will preface this episode really well. So last week when we filmed, he was getting ready for the Indianapolis Open. And he competed this weekend. I was able to coach him, and in the gi he lost, and he didn't look like himself. And and he said immediately after, just didn't feel like myself. And we talked about it, and we thought about it, and we warmed up a little differently. And the second day in the no-gi divisions, the person fighting Kyle Watson was a completely different person. He was back to his normal self. He was back to doing jiu-jitsu and was able to win his division. And I think it was a really fun experience for me, because I felt like it was just a really small mental hurdle. And together with him, myself, and Junior Silva, we were able to talk through it. And I think that's uncommon. Very seldom do you get to have moments where you have these mental blocks and you have two good coaches and you're able to talk and get through them, and Kyle was. And I think it just really shows how mentally tough he is. I think that's just kind of the story from the weekend, because we are going to reference him competing. Thought I would tell that story up front. But without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into the episode. Before we jump into the episode, I want to make sure that you guys are aware there are only 2 weeks left to pick up a free copy of Simplifying Jiu-Jitsu. That is my ebook where we take the 5 essential positions of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and we break them down to be able to train more efficiently and effective. And this is only available at simplifyingjiujitsu.com. On April 1st, we're taking it off the site, and hopefully I will do a revision of it eventually and re-release it. But for right now, it is going to be completely unavailable because it's going to need to make way for our new ebook. So if you guys do not have a copy of Simplifying Jiu-Jitsu, you need to go to simplifyingjiujitsu.com within the next 2 weeks before April 1st so you can get your free copy. That's all I have for you guys today. Let's jump into the episode. Kyle Watson, how are you doing?
Fantastic, buddy. Thanks for having me on.
I am excited to have you on. I think a lot of people will listen to the podcast, they find it, they start liking it, and they start from episode 1. And I think I do 2 interviews with you within like the first 20 episodes. And so I get a lot of messages about when are you going to have Kyle Watson back on the show, because of, they want to know, how is your pig doing health wise? And have you given more thought into eating him when he dies?
Yeah. Well,
she dies. Sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. I think about it every single day. Honestly, about her dying.
Why do you do that?
Because she's just like an annoying pet. Like she's no fun. She doesn't get along with the other animals. Like more recently I'm annoyed because I get it, she has hooves, she slides around. I don't know what it's like to have hooves, but it was icy out, and if she sees, as soon as you open the door, if she sees it's icy out, she tries to back up and won't go out, and if she doesn't go out, she'll like pee and crap in the house. So I literally have to carry her. And of course, I'm always in flip flops. So it's like this magical dancing act of getting behind her before she knows it, picking her up, all 65, 70 pounds of her, and then tiptoeing in flip flops down the stairs while they're icy, and then putting her down without us dying. It's a special talent.
So if a suburban family asks you, hey, do you think it's a good idea to have a 75-pound pig? What would you tell them at this point?
Absolutely not. Now, here's the thing. If she was the only pet, maybe, I don't know. Even then, maybe not. But I don't know. Just dealing with her in addition to the other three dogs, it's not fun. It's just a pain in the butt. Like I was just telling my assistant Devin yesterday how I have this morning ritual that's terrible. It's like every morning. It's like, it's so annoying. If I could just get my son ready for school and get him out the door, that's one thing. But there's this like process with the dogs. So because they'll like fight and eat each other's food and blah, blah. So literally I have to feed the pig and Quagmire the Boston first. Then I let them both out. Then I have to feed the Frenchies, and one of them has to have the elevated bowl with this thing that slows him down. Otherwise he barfs all the time. So then I let them out. And the problem is like literally it's like this. My wife and I joke about the circle of poop. Instead of the circle of life is a circle of poop, because the dogs eat the pig poop and the pig eats the dog's poop. And so one of the Frenchies comes in. I've never had to wipe a dog's butt before, but he never like, sorry to get gross here, but he never pinches it off cleanly. And so I literally have to wipe one of the Frenchie's butts when he comes in. Then when the pig comes in, the pig almost always just finished eating poop. So I have to wipe her mouth off. Otherwise, when she gets on the couch, she'll smear poop on the couch. So between getting my son ready for school every day and wiping dog butts, wiping pigs' mouths, feeding them at the right order, it's like, it's exhausting. So anyway, that's why daily I think about her dying.
Okay. So have you made any like decisions on if you're going to eat her or not when she dies?
I haven't, but I mean, it's still all up for debate, and I'm open to the idea.
Yeah.
And I would just, but then there's the decision. Okay, let's say we decide to eat her. Then like, who gets to cook her and like enjoy the meat alongside me?
I mean, I would think one of your first black belts that's been with you from the beginning would probably, that loves to cook. My grandma, dude, she would cook a whole hog in a second. We would have that buried in your backyard with the coals underneath, cooked 24 hours. It would be great.
It sounds like you've been thinking about this every day.
Yeah. What's funny? The last time I ate a whole hog, it was with you. And there was a point in the night that you actually wore the hog's head on your head. Do you remember that?
Here's the deal. There's a little embellishment in this story. So I tried to put it on my head, but it was too small. Like, so there's a difference between wearing the pig's head and attempting to wear the pig.
Well, it was on your head. It wasn't like fully over. It wasn't a mask. You weren't pig boy, but that's I mean, yeah, it was, if it was a hat, you would have said, oh, Kyle's wearing that hat.
That's true. I don't know. I want to think though that she's probably, I don't know what makes meat tough, but I just want to think that her meat is tough and probably not tasty.
Well, that's why I was saying we've got to go slow roast, 24-hour roast.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm with you.
Wonder how many vegan jiu-jitsu people have already turned the podcast off at this point.
Well, I'm just saying day by day, the scales are tipping on that decision.
Okay. I'm glad we got that update. It was a great place to start. What a great place to start the episode. Speaking of places to start, something that is cool about you and I's relationship and that is unique. Not many people get this, but I started day one from white belt doing jiu-jitsu under you. And do you remember my first day of doing jiu-jitsu? I was thinking about this the other day.
I don't, man. Honestly, it kind of sucks that I don't. Just because I mean, just so much. Just over the many years of all the faces and the different places I've taught and the different places I've been. You know, like the real like milestones stand out, and not that you attending isn't a big deal, but I just mean like that particular first day I don't recall. I remember the opening day of when I first started teaching there, but I don't remember that first day. But I assume that something happened where you remember it.
Yes, for sure. And that's, I think that's why I ask. I assumed you wouldn't, because for my students too, you know, you have so many people that do trials. So their first day, you know what I mean, that you see hundreds of people do their first day of jiu-jitsu. So it's hard to say like, oh, I remember this one is something different. And it really wasn't. But at the time, you know, I was 14, I just turned 14, and there was no kids team classes. It was just adult BJJ. That was all they had. And someone, you know, my mom called the front desk at the hit squad, and whoever picked up was just like, hey, we don't have anybody here. I don't care if your kid's 8 years old, bring him into class and see if Kyle will let him train. And so, you know, because this may surprise you, but no one had thought beforehand, hey, should we put an age limit on the classes? Or there was no thought. It was just, you know, we'll see what the coach says. So sweet. So we show up that night, and my dad and I ask if I can take class. And you kind of give me a look like, man, this kid is pretty small. Because I was small for 14, especially when I first started. And you go, you know what? Let's try it out. See if you like it. And so you had me drill triangles on you, which is funny because for a long time that turned into, you know, in competition at purple and brown belt, that was like the only thing I really did. But you had me drill triangles on you. And I just was thinking about this just a few days ago, kind of in prep for the episode. And it got me thinking like, man, what if Kyle would have just said, no, you're probably just too small, and I try to wait 6 months and I pick up something else and I don't do jiu-jitsu? How big of an impact on my life did that make? Literally, I don't know a single part of my life that would be the same right now if it wasn't for that one decision. Yeah, so that was kind of how I was thinking about it. And it made me curious. Are there any defining moments in your jiu-jitsu journey, your MMA journey, your careers of fighting, your teaching journey, but any defining moments where you go, man, it really does just go down to this one decision? And maybe it wasn't even your decision, like it was for me. It wasn't my decision on whether or not I got to do class. It was your decision.
Man, to pinpoint one time, there's all kinds of like crazy milestones. I don't think there maybe is one particular thing that I'm like, man, if this wouldn't have happened, everything else wouldn't have followed suit. But I do, though, think often about how many weird things aligned to make the journey in my path go the way it did. Like weird, like a lot of weird coincidences. You know, like for example, like just even me moving to St. Louis. I mean, two really random facts that some people may or may not know. Like, you know, I've told my story before a lot of times, and it's not super interesting, but still kind of cool. But I was working in Champaign, right? And a couple of things that when the hit squad was being formed, they were looking for a jiu-jitsu coach. And a couple of the weird paths that just happened to kind of intertwine was one, there's a guy you obviously know, Derek McGuire, and he and I fought.
Who got his black belt under you last year at my gym.
You and me both, yes. And you
right, but also a cool part of that story.
For sure, to come full circle that, you know, he was one of my first students as well. And but I met him prior. I fought on an MMA show in Decatur, and we just happened to start talking in the locker room, and kind of got to know each other a little bit, as much as you can get to know someone in a locker room at an MMA fight when you're about to fight, right? But he was pretty personable, and he brought up a lot of things. We talked a little bit, and I think he knew I was a jiu-jitsu guy and knew something about me. Nothing super spectacular, but just there was information passed along, and so, you know, Derek just happened to be friends with Todd Locks, who was to be the hit squad gym manager, and when they were looking for somebody, he's like, hey, have you heard of this guy, Kyle Watson? Well, so I think that individually did not make anything happen. But then the fact that Mark Fiore, who was the head coach of the hit squad, he wanted to find kind of a place somewhat close by that he felt like was a small town feel that he could raise his family. So he just happened to move to my hometown, Raymond, which is about an hour away from the gym. And I had been fighting. So there's one of my buddies who writes for the local paper would always do an article about me every time I'd fight. So Mark had just already happened to see articles about me in the local Raymond paper. And then when Todd and Mark started talking, like, oh, I heard that guy's name. Oh, I heard that guy's name too. I mean, just what a weird coincidence. And then they call me in Champaign, which is several hours away, and asked me if I want to come down and interview to do that. And kind of the rest is history. So I kind of more think about that, not so much this one moment in time, but, and there's even more than that. I don't even think those two things are the only crazy things that kind of intertwine to make things happen. But those are two that come to mind. I'm like, man, that's really wild that it worked out that way.
That is those are both. I actually didn't know that about Fiore. I didn't I didn't realize that he had moved to Raymond, and that was part of it. I knew Derek had, was someone that was really pushing for you. Mm-hmm. But I didn't know about Fiore. That's super cool.
Very cool. Yeah. And I was just very like grateful. And I think about that a lot. And then it's kind of like, then you start thinking, well, man, if I wouldn't have moved down here, I wouldn't have met my wife, and wouldn't have my kid. And it's just like a lot of cool parts to like a lot of cool pieces of the puzzle that all fit together,
And really, you also can look at it too as like how many great things came from a gym that failed.
Yeah.
Oh, sure. a gym that isn't around anymore, that never really was a big money maker. Never, they put a ton into it, and it had a lifespan. But how many people's lives were changed because of it?
For sure. For sure. I think about that a lot too. And it's like, the cool thing is, I say that all the time, though, it's like sucks because when you say something failed, you immediately get these negative thoughts in your head. But all the people there were good people that had good intentions. I say that all the time. That like they all wanted to make a gym and make successful people, fighters, and what have you. And there was a lot of great people that came together. It's just they just didn't have the business acumen, and so they had a hard time balancing. Okay, hey, we want to create really tough fighters and good martial artists with like knowing how to keep the gym running and keeping the doors open. But you're right. I mean, so many great guys. I mean, we sent a ton of people to the UFC. I honestly, and even though it had its downfall, I learned so many lessons of what not to do with my business that really helped me kind of say, hey, I'm not going to make these same mistakes. And the good thing is I didn't have to make the mistakes myself. I got to witness others do it. And again, that sounds bad, but it just was like kind of a side effect of it,
Man, that is something you said right at the beginning. Is you said something like maybe your story isn't very interesting, but when maybe for somebody who trains at a super gym and people make it to the UFC all the time, it isn't, right? But for all of us who don't, that are from the Midwest and are from towns like Raymond that nobody's heard of and nobody cares about, to have made it to the UFC. I mean, honestly, I couldn't obviously it's because you're my coach, but I couldn't tell you how many times in trying to compete at adult black belt, I have told myself, if Kyle could make it to the UFC, you could do this, and, and so I know it's weird, but you don't realize a lot of times, until somebody else even points it out to you, how big some of your successes are, and something we were talking about, and this is an interesting fact. You and I have both been on one of your students' podcast, a Jim's podcast. I think it's called Masters of Fitness Business. Is that correct? Yeah. And something that he talks about, and we were kind of just touching on it, one of his questions. And so I don't remember what your answer was. So I'll just ask you, I'll steal Jim's question and ask you again.
What if it's a different answer though?
Huh?
What if it's a different answer?
Well, then that's great. Then maybe you've changed it up. I don't know. Yeah. But something that we would ask on the podcast is what was your greatest failure? Meaning like a failure that turned into a great lesson or something that changed your life or affected you greatly.
Oh man, come on, man. You gotta give me a hint on what my answer was.
Oh, I don't remember what your answer was.
Oh, shit.
You could make it anything. You could have a different. I actually changed my answer. I actually gave an answer and then changed it. Let's hear it.
I know exactly what it is. And I don't know if this was the answer on then. I don't remember. But one thing I just to get out there before I answer that is just the fact that I really enjoy being on like podcasts like yours and Jim's, because you guys ask great questions and you can tell that you actually put some thought into it. And so it's when I used to do all kinds of like interviews for the UFC, literally they would ask the exact same question every single time. was Koscheck that big of a dick? What did you think of Bruce Leroy? It was literally, it was like this boilerplate every single time, same question. You guys ask great questions. My biggest failure that turned into my biggest success was definitely getting cut from the UFC, losing and getting cut from the UFC. And the reason being is, and I may have said that, answered that similarly. I'm not really even sure, but the thing was, at the time, it was devastating. It was devastating. I was like, I worked so hard for this. I knew like my expiration was a little earlier than other people because I got to the big time late in the game. You know what I mean? Like when I was on the show, I was about 30, and there was guys on the show who were 18, and I could feel that I was slowing down a little bit. Like, I mean, I felt like I still, man, I feel like I had knowledge, I had technique, still had the fire. I could still hang with those guys. I mean, I won some matches, of course, but I could feel myself slowing down. and I definitely don't want to put this, like, it all sounds bad when it comes out of your mouth to say, like, I only had my students to train with, because you've dealt with this too. Like only having certain, you can still make the best of a situation. But the hard part was just that it wasn't just that I only had my students to train with. And I shouldn't even say that, because I could have made the effort to make trips out to big camps and done that and stuff like that. So there's no one to blame but myself. But it was more the fact of like I started a business right around then, I started my gym. And so I'm trying to learn the ropes of running my own business, where there's the stress of like, okay, now it's all on me. If his squad, it wasn't on me. If things like my jiu-jitsu program was doing fine, but if the gym overall failed, it wasn't on me. But now I'm supporting my wife and I just on what happens with this gym. So there's the stress and hard work of that, right? And then I felt like that was making my training suffer, because now I can train a little less, and when I can train, it's only with the people I have access to, right? So I really think that for lack of a better term, shit the bed on my last UFC fight. I think I beat myself. I mean, all props to my opponent, but I definitely was mentally not there. I was mentally not. When I felt after it, was like, that was not me out there. That was not my best showing. And that's the worst way to go out, when you get cut off of a fight that you lose, and that was not your performance. That was not me out there. I remember, even to this day, I remember Fiore coming up to me. He saw something change. I was in the locker room. I remember him coming up to me, and he goes, "Hey man, are you okay?" I was like, he's like, "There's something different." He goes, "Dude, we're about to go out and fight." He goes, "If something is wrong, you got to tell me now." And I just faked it. I just said, "Nope, man, I'm fine. I'm good. I'm mentally ready. I'm going to kill this guy." Kind of put on the bravado, but like inside, I was like, kind of like already kind of defeated a little bit. Like I had a little bit of, I let the self-doubt get to me. And, so I went out there just not myself. I felt like I really kind of failed. I didn't even really attempt takedowns. Anyway, ended up getting knocked out. UFC had just absorbed a ton of lightweights, so they were just looking to get rid of people. I fought Saturday. I found out like Tuesday I was cut, and I was devastated. But the thing is that I just kind of, in my head, I was like, man, do I really want to do this anymore? And that's a common thing fighters face after they lose. I've coached fighters that have been like that in many situations. Do I even really want to do this? And you usually got to take a few weeks, pick yourself back up, and you get motivated again. And I still fought again. That was when I signed with Cage Warriors. I went to travel, and I went over to the Middle East and fought and what have you. And but anyway, just kind of my career winding down with that moment of kind of questioning myself, and do I really want to do this anymore? And having a heart to heart with my wife, and her saying kind of, is it really worth it, Kyle? Is it worth it? You have all these other things to look forward to. Is it worth it? And it was so hard. I remember for a couple of years, I wouldn't even say I was retired. I would just, in my head, I knew I was retired, but I wouldn't admit it, because people would still ask me, literally, I mean, probably 4 or 5 years after I had fought my last fight, people would ask me when my next fight was. And I'd be like, oh, I don't know. I just couldn't bring myself to say it, that I'm done. But that was the long way to say that was the best thing that could have happened, because if I would have kept fighting, I would have had to half-ass something, and I would have half-assed the gym. I'm not saying the gym necessarily would have failed, because I don't think I would have let it fail, but it might have run poorly, and I don't think I could have built up the same reputation and got people to trust me as much, because I wouldn't have been as present as I needed to be a good coach. And so I think just that happening allowed me to just focus on like, hey, I'm doing this. I'm going to make this the best gym I can make it. And just, so, and then I, turned that into what it is now. And I'm really happy about it. I'm really, really proud of it. I'm happy about it. When I look back, do I still think, man, I wish I could have got a couple more fights or like went out on a win, or because I knew at that time, man, there were still several lightweights in the roster I could beat. I knew I could beat them. I just needed the right matchup and the right time. And I look back, so I still, part of me is like, man, I wish I could have done that, but it happened that way absolutely for a reason. I'm super happy it did now.
Mm-hmm. That's really good. That's a really good failure. That it really is. That it was fun too, because I got to see during all this time when you were only getting to train with your students for UFC fights. I was one of your best training partners. I was, and I was a blue belt. I was a 17-year-old blue belt or 16-year-old blue belt. And,
I still couldn't pass your guard though.
You really had like, you really had a successful career, even though it's a 2-fight career. And you look at what you were doing during that time, and the fact that you did make it, because where would it have been if you never got the chance to get on the Ultimate Fighter, and you never got to, or if you would have, there was a point in the first, I guess your second fight, your first fight on the show against Andy Main, where you were in a ton of trouble,
For
and
sure.
Andy Main's a tough guy. If Andy beats you there, do you ever make it, do you ever fight in the UFC? What is kind of, where do you end up there?
Yeah, that's wild to think about too. Yeah, he had me in trouble, man. We still talk. I'm still good friends with him. I talked to him all the time. I actually just talked to him a couple of weeks ago. We literally message each other all the time because he's I think he's got the same thing going on, man. He's an entrepreneur. He owns a bunch of pliables, restaurants, and he does real estate. And he has his gym is humongous. I think his gym is like size wise and student wise is bigger than mine. And so he might say something similar that, he had kind of like similar, hey, that was meant to happen. And yeah, Andy had me in trouble, man. He had my back, and I really credit, having had a lot of fights going into the show, that I was able to keep my composure because I'd been in tough spots before. And, but yeah, he was pretty close for sure. But I'm super glad if Andy watches this. I'm really, really glad I beat him.
Don't worry, Kyle. Nobody watches this.
Well, another part of the story a lot of people don't understand, I think it's pretty fascinating too, is a lot of people don't know that before all this, before like fighting everything, I actually worked for a toy company. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
Yeah, and I actually got it was right around the time that like Tickle Me Elmo was really popular,
Yeah.
And I got fired. I got fired from the toy factory.
Why'd you get fired from the toy factory?
I kept giving Elmo too many testicles.
That was a good transition there.
Oh, okay.
That was a really good transition. Honestly, when you laughed, when you said "Tickle Me Elmo," I was like, I know he's joking, but I got to follow through here. Let him hit it out of the park there. But that was good. The too many testicles.
I was trying my best to not smile at all, but as soon as I said toy factory, I'm like, he knows I'm.
It was too long of a. Yeah, it was too hard to keep your composure. And if there was if you had to put together a team of people that okay, we have to be. Do you remember the show Silent Library?
No.
So there was this show Silent Library, and it'd be a group of 4 dudes, and they're it's an MTV show. They're in a pretend library, and they have all these decimal meters around, and they're not allowed to make noise up to a certain level, so they can't laugh. And they have to do all these really funny, really random tasks. And if I was building a team, one of the worst combinations for Silent Library would be you and I. There is no situation where we would be supposed to keep our cool and not laugh that one of us wouldn't say something or do something and make the other one laugh. There's no way.
Well, it's funny you say that too, because literally a couple of days ago, my timeline, it popped up, when you and I were leaving to film in Boston for Fanatics. And looking back now, the joke's very, it's just not tasteful at all. But it was like you're turned around and I'm taking a picture of you, and I'm saying, and I'm like, it's like just when the pandemic's starting, but they hadn't canceled anything, and people are just now starting to wear masks. And I'm like, Josh and I are fake sneezing and coughing to get a little extra leg room. And I
Well,
was like, ooh, that one didn't age well.
or you know what really didn't age well? When we got on the flight and you out loud looked at everybody sitting down and said, "Look at all this coronavirus." To keep it for context, though, that was a few weeks before. That was when we were all still joking about it.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know?
yeah.
That was
It was funny then, not now.
yeah. There was a time that the PC police hadn't gotten to
No,
coronavirus
no,
yet,
but
and
now you
Kyle
say that,
Watson.
I do remember that now. Yeah, yeah.
That
Terrible.
was well, and then the fact that like the picture that we took to announce it, you see everybody else's picture. They're standing right in front of the BGA Fanatic sign with a big smile on their face. The picture of you and I, you have me in a Walls of Jericho. And that's the picture of you and I when we announced that we were doing BGA
Yes,
Fanatics
yeah, right.
instructionals.
Well, I mean, yeah, I don't want people to take us too seriously.
That's that I don't think we ever have to worry about that.
No, not at all. Not at all.
So something we were talking about the other day, we just kind of talked differently about how you can train now, just how you can learn differently, and there's so many more ways to do it. We're talking about this yesterday, and we always will bounce off coaching ideas and things like that. But something that is interesting about jiu-jitsu is jiu-jitsu has these waves of technique where I told you my dog would bark before your
Okay.
dog's bark.
Mine is too.
Oh,
They
okay.
might have heard mine.
That was
Thor, is
probably
it
it.
Thor?
Yeah, Thor. Yeah,
Yeah.
Thor probably heard you from 30 minutes away and heard your dogs. But crap, what was I just saying? We're just
You were talking
talking about
about waves of
oh yeah, so how technique comes in waves, and a wave of jujitsu technique that really has been forgotten is stand up and takedowns. And why do you think? Would you agree with that?
I would, and you know, I think that one thing that struck me the other, this was, I guess, it was a little while ago. It was on it was a video that popped up. You know how your phone listens to you, and I don't know what came up, but it was something. It was Dan or her talking about something, and he was talking. So I think it might have been his takedown thing. I don't know, but I just remember him saying something to the effect of like nowadays, like you can be a world champion without having to learn takedowns, and some of the effect. I don't even really remember all of what he said, but just the bit I remember just made me think, kind of expanding on that, is just that is so true. Because one thing I say all the time is people, it's already really, really hard to be a white belt in jiu-jitsu. It's really hard.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then let's say you make moderate to solid progress in jiu-jitsu and you think, oh man, yeah, I'm onto something. But you also have to be a white belt in wrestling, which is arguably even harder, not necessarily harder to learn, but harder on the body, in
Mm-hmm.
addition to being hard to learn. And so people might have like gone through that, like, oh man, jiu-jitsu was tough. I made it this far. I don't want to have to do that all over again with a whole other discipline, only to maybe get 2 points in a match.
Mm-hmm.
And then back to Danaher's point, saying that, hey, I could potentially train correctly and my whole career and with the right people in the right gym, and I could potentially be a world champion and never even really know a takedown, or not necessarily know. You're going to know one, but you may not ever be good at some. You know what I mean? And so I think, alluding to the fact that it's the easy way out, and I'm not blaming anyone. If anyone was like, hey, I don't want to do that, I'm not. I get that approach, but I don't agree with it.
Why not?
Because I think that you're always going to run into people. I just, like I tell my students, like, the goal, obviously, if you're trying to win a tournament, your goal at that moment in time in your journey is to win that tournament, right?
Mm-hmm.
But my goal for my students, and I hope their goal as well, in addition to getting their black belt at some point, is I want them to be the most complete grapplers they can be, like complete grapplers. And that's why you see, not trying to rag on the IBJJF, but, and I know you share this approach, but that's why when you walk up and look at my rules for what leg locks are allowed, you can do pretty much everything at my gym is allowed. I usually ask for kind of people to hold off on heel hooks until like I know that they know it. I'm still cool with whites and blue belts doing heel hooks as long as they know them and they know that whoever they're going with understands them too, so no one gets hurt in that respect. But otherwise, everything is fair game. And the reason why is because I don't think that the rule set of the IBJJF should dictate how good of a grappler you can be. And I believe that I'm a fan of theirs. I'm competing for them, soon. And I do understand why the rules are the way they are. But I think that there's such a small percentage of your student population that actually competes. Why hold them all to that same standard and say like, okay, I know 90% of you don't compete, so I'm not going to show you a knee bar until you're a brown belt. You know what I mean? It makes no sense whatsoever. Because if they're never going to compete, or maybe they're not going to compete till way later on, I want them to be complete grapplers. Then back to the point is that you're going to run into people as you get better and better and better, and you will start to get better at competition and strategy. And you start looking at other people coming up the other side of the bracket, and you're going against them. And there's going to be some people that like, man, that guy is a really, really good passer. I don't think I want to pull on them. And then what are you going to do? You know what I mean? Like, or maybe their passing game is like the anti, it basically destroys your type of guard. So I think I tell my students, hey, I'm cool with you being a bottom player, but I want you to have 2 to 3 solid takedowns in your back pocket that you can pull out if you need to surprise someone or you need to strategically use it against someone. Same thing goes the other way. It's like, I used to be very anti like pulling guard, and I still, that wouldn't be my first approach, right? But I mean, I will, and I have when I feel like the timing is necessary, or like maybe I can't take someone down, or they've already taken me down, and I know that they're maybe better wrestler than me, or they got the better of me. So I just think to be a complete grappler, I think you need to learn both, and you can still be a guard player that has takedowns. It's kind of like I was telling somebody the other day that this thing I read is completely unrelated, but I like it because it's part of my philosophy in life is like, don't be a working guy that has a family, be a family man that works. And it's kind of the same approach. It's like, be a guard player with takedowns, you know what I mean? Or be a smash passer with some sweeps. You know what I mean? Same idea.
See, that makes perfect sense to me. And I think that's something you've always preached to me. I think I've always been a guard puller, but I've always probably had better stand-up than most of the guys in my division.
Absolutely.
And I don't use it a lot because, I just don't fight a ton of stand-up. I get worn out a little more. And so I don't fight a ton of stand-up. But 2 things. One, I can go, okay, this guy, I know he's going to pull guard too, and I'll come up to pass him. So strategically, it makes sense for me to try to start on top with 2 points. I need to be able to take this guy down. So that has always been helpful. And I've won a lot of matches off that. One time in Atlanta, I popped one of my ribs in the middle of a match, and I won on he was trying to pull, and I shot a double leg. I was a brown belt, and I took him down. I, in quotes, took him down off of his pull. And I then, like, right when I took him down, my rib pops, and he proceeded to just beat me to death for the entire match, but he never scored any points. His sweep was when I had just passed his guard and tried to chase his back. I fall off, and now I'm on bottom. He scored like 14 advantages on me in the match, but I won on the 2 points. And you look at that match and you go, okay, well, I mean, I probably don't win that. That guy was better than me on, in the other spots. I probably don't win that match without the takedown. And all I have to do is expose that one area of your game that you're bad at strategically. And I get to win a match against somebody who's probably better everywhere else than me, just by, being able to have that. And then the second thing is, I've also always felt confident that I can go, man, even if I'm fighting one of the best stand-up guys in the world, I can focus on it for a period of time and I can stand up with these guys. Yes. And that only comes from having wrestled and having learned how to stand up and start from the feet.
Well, yeah. And I didn't mean to start to cut you out there, but that just drives home another point I usually try to make too, is that You can argue in jiu-jitsu a lot of times why you would want to understand a position that you might not use is because someone might use it on you and you need to understand the ins and outs of it. And so a lot of times just understanding how people will set up and perform high percentage takedowns will then, if you learn them, then you start to understand, okay, well, he needs this response, or here's a trigger or a cue that's going to tell me this person's about to take me down. So that in turn can help you with your takedown defense. Even if you don't want to be great at performing the takedown, at least you understand what someone else is looking for to take you down, and then you can maybe respond and adjust a little bit quicker on your defense. So I think that's important to understand both sides for sure.
Hey guys, Josh here. Just wanted to interrupt really quick and tell you about something exciting that we have going on. It's simplifyingjujitsu.com, and that is Kyle Watson's instructional being on sale. Currently, it is $50 off. It is only available at simplifyingjujitsu.com. Kyle Watson's instructional is called Simplifying Takedowns. He takes one of the toughest parts of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, one of the most athletic parts of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and he breaks them down into really simple and easy to understand bites. And it's very apparent when you see Kyle's students compete, when you see Kyle compete, how much better he is at stand-up than most of the people in jiu-jitsu. I watched him in Indianapolis go 4 shots and 4 takedowns, and that's not including all the times that people tried to come back up and he wrestled them back down. This guy really understands takedowns, and for right now, this instructional, this course is $50 off, only available at simplifyingjujitsu.com. And then if we look at jiu-jitsu through the self-defense lens, you've got to be able to take people down. You have to be able to, if you are going to fight somebody and you want to use jiu-jitsu, you have to get to where jiu-jitsu is used. And your choices are either to lay on your back in whatever environment that you're in, whether concrete, whether whatever, and somebody who's just big and strong could slam you. If you've been slammed on a mat, it is nothing like being slammed even an inch on concrete, and so you have that, and then you have the facts that, or you could be on top where he has to deal with being on concrete, and you're really good at jiu-jitsu, and we're back to the ground's my ocean thing,
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, I mean, it's there's so many factors that can go into that, but yeah, I mean, the all other things being equal, the ground itself, like the actual physical ground, can be such a great leveraging tool to immobilize someone, and and also too, like going back to the defensive aspect, is there might be a situation where you absolutely don't want to go to the ground, and you need to be able to dictate whether it does or does not go there. So I think an understanding of takedowns helps in that respect, that like once you kind of are able to assess where things need to take place, you can either take the fight to the ground or make sure it doesn't go to the ground, kind of thing. I think that's kind of an important thing.
That is, the ability to choose where a fight takes place is in a jiu-jitsu tournament too. If somebody has amazing passing, for instance, not that this is a great reference because I still lost the match, but when I fought Murillo Santana, I was not pulling guard on Murillo. And if I was a guard player only, and if I was like, man, I can't stand up with people, I'm going to get taken down, I would have been in trouble. I wouldn't have been able to fight him.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I mean, I just having that in your back pocket, I think is important to be able to pull that out. And it goes just like everything else. It's like, if you're not going to be a takedown specialist, I mean, it's not like you have to devote, the largest chunk of your training to that. But I think, periodically you got to keep the blade sharp, because you might say, okay, I know a couple of takedowns, but then you don't work them for like 6, 8, 10 months. There's timing and distance that like really fades. And you can just tell with people who are working their takedowns, you can just tell a difference in the sharpness and their ability to pull the trigger. And so that has to happen. So I definitely think people, they don't have to make it the bulk of their training, but I think that they should definitely make time for it monthly at least, where they get some takedown sessions in.
When did you, this is kind of a backtrack, But when did you start to say, you know what, I'm going to let my guys do leg locks? I'm going to let them do whatever leg locks. Because forever the stigma was, oh, you can't let them do these leg locks because there will be injury.
Man, I don't recall like the exact moment in time. There's so much stuff that, looking back, not like a big regret. I understand that things had to happen the way they happened, in their own time. But there are some things I for sure would go back earlier and change. There's definitely a lot of stuff about the way I taught. If I knew now what or knew then what I know now, I would teach differently. Of course, I think everybody would. That's not saying much, anything super novel, but but I think, just kind of, I think it just took me a longer time to shift out of the old mindset, because oftentimes, you kind of just get what you're handed down. And I don't mean like that in the sense that like you don't take accountability for yourself and you blame it on your past coach and whatever. That's not what I mean. I just mean that like you kind of get stuck. It's habitual. You get stuck in these pathways in your mind that like, this is how it's been done. This is how I learned. This is how they're going to learn. So I think it took me a little while to shake that. And then once I was kind of like really, I felt like I was really more independent as a coach, whereas like I just kind of felt like a little more on my own. I felt like, things don't have to be any certain way. It can be whatever way I want it to be. And I don't remember the specific light bulb moment that said, Kylie, do like change everything. I don't think there was that. It was just over time, I just started to see like, man, that's not really relevant anymore. Or, man, I've never seen anyone hit that live in competition ever. Why am I showing this? And
Do you have any examples of those things?
I mean,
whether techniques or training ideas, things that you've actually changed and said, hey, this isn't the best way to do this.
I mean, like starting the class with like 20 arm bars each side, 20 triangles each side, shrimping down the mat 18,000 times. Like just even, I'm not even saying some of those things could not be helpful, but there's just no connection point to be like, okay, here, shrimp every day of your life for 2 years, but I'm never going to tell you how and when you actually use the shrimping. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Or the lesson that follows has nothing to do with shrimping. You know what I mean? Like it might make sense if you show the shrimping and then immediately after you did techniques that in like 5 different places in jiu-jitsu where you would use shrimping. That might make sense. You know what I mean? But there's things like that, and there's just a bunch of stuff where I'm just like, man, and then just also like I said, that mindset about like not limiting people to rule sets that are given by tournaments. I really felt like that for a while. I'm just like, this is stupid. This is stupid. It's like, why can I wrist lock you? Or honestly, frankly, I say this all the time. I really honestly think you're more in danger from a Kimura in a tournament than a knee bar.
Oh,
I really
my gosh,
think people rip Kimuras and they come on so much faster when it comes loose. Your leg is so much stronger than your arm, and you have plenty of time to realize your leg is locked out and tapped. You know what I mean? So it's just like, I don't know. It's just like weird to me. So I feel like I felt like that for a long time, but I feel like the implementation of my changing mindset was very incremental, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So do you with leg locks, because I'm sure there are people that listen who are not allowed to do certain leg locks at their gym. Do you ever have problems with people getting injured because of leg locks that would be illegal at their belt level?
Not really, because I mean, I'm not saying people don't get injured. Honestly, here's what I think happens more often than not. The times I've seen people get hurt, is more the person did not respect the hold as much as they should have, in the sense that like it wasn't even the person applying that hurt them. It was the person that was like, oh, I'm not really in danger now. I can fight out of this. And then that one little extra rotation makes the pop or the tear or whatever. And honestly, I've seen that way more than I've seen it that it's just a jerk that throws on a leg lock on somebody that doesn't know and just tries to hurt them. It's more just the people that don't want to tap, and it's the ego driven, like not respecting the move. And I try to be really careful about, I teach leg locks all the time now. And I think, and here's the thing, I don't want to butthurt anybody that's out there that's listening, but I also think one thing, and I take the blame for this too, but I feel like I've changed now. So I feel like other people can do the same. Is part of the reason why I think a lot of things are not allowed is because the coach doesn't understand them themselves.
Totally.
You know what I mean? Like they might say, hey, that's not allowed, not because they're genuinely worried about you getting hurt. It's because I don't really understand it myself. So if we just avoid it completely, all of us, I don't have to learn it. I don't have to explain it, and you won't get hurt all in one. It's like a win-win, right? So I've made a pretty focused effort these last couple of years of taking things that I know are outside of my comfort zone as a coach and learning them, and then understanding them. And the nice thing is, even if you're not like a great black belt, I feel like if you've been around long enough though, but you understand jujitsu, what I mean? I feel like your ability to assimilate knowledge is so much faster. So I feel like now I can take something I didn't understand at all, and I can study it for a little while and understand it so much quicker than before, because you have so much more auxiliary knowledge, supporting knowledge that helps you. So now I'm not as worried about it. I'm like, hey, I don't know that, but you know what? I'm going to grab Trevor. I'm going to grab another training partner, and at open mat, I'm going to drill the crap out of that. And I'm going to actually try it on people myself and work out the nuances and the kinks for a couple months. And then once I feel like, man, I got a really good grasp of that, I'm going to teach it to my students, because there's no excuse for me to, as a coach, to not show something just because I don't understand it, So, and I'm not saying the other way around either. Like, hey, just show something haphazardly when you don't understand it. Like, don't show something crappy. Like, just say because, Kyle said I'm being a bad coach, I should just show everything. I mean, you still want to understand so you can teach it well. But I just have really, that's one of the things that's made jujitsu for me exciting again after, like, I can't remember now, like this September, I think is 23 years for 23 years for me doing jujitsu.
Man.
And I feel like, I know, look at these gray hairs. But
you didn't have as many of those when I started.
Oh no, I don't. I blame my son. But
I don't think you even had. I think we were right between. We were in like a golden age of Kyle Watson beard and hair. It was right after the frosted tips, but before the gray hair.
Dude, no, but man, this happened. I'm not blaming the pandemic either, but man, this just happened. Like, I mean, I looked literally back at a couple of podium picks not too long ago that were just a couple years ago, and I had almost no gray hair in my beard. I'm like, man, it just happened in a couple years. It's terrible. I forget where I was going with that. Oh, it's just that that aspect of it, of saying I'm going to learn stuff so I can be a better coach, and honestly, I've implemented a bunch of new stuff into my game that I'm actually using as a competitor too. But that's made jiu-jitsu exciting for me again. And that's one of the things I tell students all the time is like, look, I have been doing it this long, over 2 decades, and I still get excited every single week about jiu-jitsu. And there's not many things you can say that you can still get excited and be like, wow, that feels kind of brand new again. So that's a win-win in multiple ways. One, like, I'm progressing as a student, I'm progressing as a coach, and I'm also just stoking the fire continuously. So I just think, if I had any advice for the coaches out there that either they feel stagnant or they feel like they're hiding things from their students only because they don't understand it, I think just take that dive. I mean, it's like, be honest with yourself and say, hey, I don't really know this, and I feel like my students should not be held up because I don't understand something. Anyway.
I think that's super good advice. I really do. It's crazy to me when I put a straight ankle lock on black belts, especially guys that don't compete. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but it's much easier to have gaping holes in your game if you don't compete.
Yeah.
And I will put a straight ankle lock on them, and they not only have no idea of defense, of the most basic leg lock attack, but they tap like before I even put any pressure on it or anything like that. I'm like, dude, it's an ankle lock. I could go full force on this for a while before it snaps your ankle. You know what I mean? Unless I'm the biggest jerk in the world, you don't need to tap to that. And you don't know that, you don't know you had 3 or 4 layers of jujitsu that you could have fought, but your lack of understanding. And so, like, how are you going to teach your students that? I always hear people say, like, yeah, I don't know how to do the leg locks, but I know how to defend them. So I can teach my guys how to defend them. And I'm like, dude, if you don't know how to do them, you definitely don't know how to defend them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I saw that as a glaring hole in my game. Like, I think I might've told you about that. And right around that time that I took, when I heard that the IBJJF was going to start allowing heel hooks in no-gi, I'm like, well, that gives me no excuse. Now I got to step up my game. I feel like I already had an understanding, but I would say it was a pretty minimal. And I almost I would describe it as poor.
Mm-hmm.
I understood it enough, like the basic mechanics of applying it, but not really how to get there, how to get out, what are the advanced setups that have come out. Really fell behind the curve, and I still don't feel like I'm great at them, but I did take a focused, I'd say probably, man, it was probably 4 to 6 months. And every single time I would go in and train with Trevor, that's all we would do, just over and over and over, really focusing on like the backside 50-50 and getting the heel hooks from a lot of different places. And then of course, then they say, okay, masters can't do it. So like, I was really pissed, but then I got over that quickly, and I was kind of like, well, no, guess what? You got better at it. And then you can show your students now. And I actually did a heel hook clinic for my students, and it was probably, I mean, I had a wait list. I mean, I closed it off at like, I don't know how many people. I had like 61 people there, and everybody seemed to like really enjoy it. And I just, and I wouldn't have been able to do that had I not like studied and said, hey, and it probably could have been better. I mean, I thought it went really well. It could have been better, of course. And there's still a lot about the leg lock game I have to learn. But if I hadn't said, hey, I'm going to focus for a few months and get better at this, then I wouldn't be as comfortable as I am now saying who in my gym can do heel hooks and who can't, because you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And then kind of helping the people that want to do them, I feel like are safe enough to do them, helping them understand them. You know what I mean? So
that's really good. We've got a little time left, but I know how long-winded my coach is. So I'm going to go final question. And if we hit some other stuff after that, we will. So I switched up the final question on the show, and we moved away from how do you suck less at jiu-jitsu, because I had asked that 100 times. And so now
some good people, you got some great people. Great answers.
And so I got some really good answers. So I decided to switch up the question, make it a little more broad. What is the best or some of the best jiu-jitsu advice that you have ever gotten? It doesn't have to be specifically jiu-jitsu. It can just be related.
Oh man, that's hard to sum up. I mean, I'll have some things for sure, but I mean, there's hard to put I feel like there's a lot of things. I think, man, one of the hardest parts is that before I get to the actual advice, I think one of the hardest things is that there's so much good advice, but I'm still trying to figure out how to get people to take it when they need it. And here's what I mean by that is, even if I went back and told my then self, you got to do this. I mean, think about when you start jiu-jitsu and you first start getting decent, and you're like kind of not necessarily cocky, but you're just like kind of that young, like, oh, I know everything, kind of like, would you really accept it? It's like that idea of saying like, enjoy the journey, don't worry about promotions. You know what I mean? It is true. That is so true. You should do that. That is absolutely great advice. But if someone told me that when I was a white belt or a blue belt, I would still be like, when's my next stripe? When am I getting promoted? You know what I mean? Like, like you want it, you're hungry for it. But anyway, so that wasn't an answer to your question, but I'm just saying that even any answer to your question, I want to know, and maybe I'll throw that back at you afterwards, is how do I get people to listen to that? But I think that is part of it, is that part of that kind of that advice of like, enjoy the journey is like, if you kind of have that, we mentioned this, I think even maybe when we were talking, you and I were talking yesterday, but that idea of like growth mindset versus performance mindset, I think that's such a huge deal. I just don't know. I mean, I think I was pretty perceptive back then. I might have listened, but I think really that advice is so huge, is leaving every training session. Now, it won't happen. There's sometimes you're just going to be like, man, I didn't get any better today. I came in with the wrong mindset. Maybe I had a bad day, something happened in life, and you're going to have those days. But if the vast majority, like 75% of the time you go in and train, you can leave feeling productive. Not that you won every round, that you just felt like, man, there was a position I was working on. My timing got a little better. Maybe I did hit one move I'm working on. Maybe I got to the position I was working on. If you just leave feeling that you had any incremental success, and you could do that 50% of the time, 75% of the time, versus every single time going to train and basing your thoughts on how successful the practice was when you leave on whether you won or lost, that would be huge. That would be huge.
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel like that has tentacles that would spread out into so many other things. Kind of like that idea of me saying like how important I think defense is first. Like people always want to do submissions and the cool YouTube moves, but then when they go to try it live, they get frustrated because they're never in the positions at the right time to do those moves because they didn't focus on their defense and they didn't focus on their posture. Because once they're really good at those things, then they'll almost always, or they'll more likely be in positions to apply the submissions. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So back to that growth mindset, not performance mindset. When you have that mindset, then I think you'll start to look at all those other things. Other advice that I could give you, you would probably like lean into that stuff anyway. You would start to like, you'd be like, hey, I want to grow. So I'm going to come in. And like we said yesterday, we're going to train with intention. We're going to be intentional about our training. So if you thought growth mindset, you're probably going to train more intentionally. You know what I mean? Like if you thought growth mindset, you're probably going to focus on the holes in your game, not just always saying, oh, there's a new guy in the gym. I better play my A game because I can't lose to that guy. So I think that would probably be one of the more important things, just because I think that would kind of have spider webs that would reach out into a lot of other advice that you get and kind of overlap, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. It's very true though, that it's tough to take to take advice and know that it is going to be used, because for the example you gave about the belts, just focus on the journey. I don't feel like I actually understood that until I was a brown belt. And I thought I did. And so maybe I just think I understand it now. Maybe I'll understand that with more depth later on. But yeah, but I guess that's a common thing about good advice is it's good advice forever. And even when you follow it, then you start to learn how to follow it even better.
Oh, for sure. For sure. Well, I think too, like a lot of that can go into, like, we think about the 80-20 rule, which is more often than not the 90-10 or the 95-5, you know what I mean? And you already do a lot of this, I think, with your instruction, is like, spending 90% of your time focusing on the 10% that's the most important stuff. All that other stuff is just like fog and just kind of it's cool, but it kind of gets in the way. And it's like, if you focus on the really, really important stuff, I mean, even just the stuff we've been talking about lately, the defensive tactics. I mean, man, just think of how good people would be if they spent even 75% of the time on just that stuff for a while. Like how actually, like you were saying, that your passing has actually gotten better because you and your students have been working on defensive stuff better. Like that seems like incomprehensible, but it's so true. And so that's another part of, like, I think that the growth mindset would kind of seep into, is saying like, hey man, focus on the stuff that is the most important, and a lot of the other like unimportant stuff will kind of fall in line. You know what I mean? So yeah.
And yeah, that is, and you think growth mindset, you can even expand that even further. Growth mindset doesn't just have to be you. Sometimes growth mindset is the gym. Sometimes you look at the team that you're on, even if you have no financial interest in it or anything. Yesterday, I came in and I go, okay, today my job is to help Kyle as much as I can. And my job, because you're getting ready to compete this weekend. And then, I'm just going to get the rounds that I need to get. And maybe someone would go, well, Josh, you weren't focused on getting better. I'm like, well, yes, I was. That's the room that I'm going to be training in when I'm prepping for my next tournament. And if I can make that room better, well, guess what? I'm going to be better. I'm going to get to have better training partners, and that is my growth. So sometimes we have to think like even longer term on our growth than just nightly.
Oh, absolutely. That's perfect. And I think that's where I try to do a little bit of, like, be a little bit of inspiration. One of my students messaged me about something different. We were talking about jiu-jitsu, but it got to a point where I just basically said, hey, if you need to talk more, I'm available anytime. Come to my office. We can chat more. And he said something to the fact, I don't remember how he worded it exactly, but he said something like, you seem to have everything together, like in your life. Like you seem to have everything together. Sometimes I'd like to talk about that, because sometimes I feel like I don't know if he was stretched too thin, or he just, things were out of balance. And I took that as a good compliment, but I also took that I do try to do that. I try to role model because I do have a lot of things together and I don't have everything perfect. But I guess why I'm bringing that up is that I extend that growth mindset. And I didn't always necessarily know I was doing it intentionally, even though I was always focused on being a better, or not always, but once I knew that that was the most important thing, is becoming a better family man, making sure that I give my students the time and the attention they need, giving myself my own like development and personal space and mental improvement, like things I need to be a better person morally, like just really focusing on, having good integrity and just always like trying to make the right decision so that people that are watching me, like that may look up to me, like say, oh yeah, that's the right way. So anyway, that growth mindset extends out into life in the sense that like, if you start to apply that to all those other things, kind of like you were saying, I think that lends itself to having a balanced life. And I think there's a lot of things I don't do well, but one thing I do feel like I do well is balance. I feel like I do spend a ton of time with my family. I spend a ton of time at the gym. I still, there's some things that get the short end of the stick, and that's okay. I mean, I feel like honestly, like, I'm competing this weekend and I feel ready. I'm ready. I trained, I feel ready. Could I have done more? For sure. Did it get the short end of the stick compared to some of the other things? For sure. But I feel like overall, when I say the balancing act is said and done, the important things got importance and got the time they needed, and the things that were less important got less time. So.
That's really good, man. That's really good advice, Kyle. I love it. Is there anything you want to say to finish?
Well, let's just say this, because I know we were talking a little bit about takedowns, and I was just going to tell people, try to learn them. Like don't shy away from them just because it's tough. Because while we're on the growth mindset thing, I think back to what I was saying before about people not wanting to be a white belt at something else. I think you should want to be a white belt at some other things. It's like there's so many things that I'm still trying to get better at. Like I know something you're good at, Josh, is like cooking. I'm not good at cooking. And I'm not saying I'm trying to get better at cooking. I'm just trying to get better at nutrition in general. So I've been learning just the same way I learned real estate, the same way I learned about cryptocurrency, is I look at other people that are doing it, that are successful. I look at what they're doing. I watch a lot of podcasts. I read some books. So my nutrition hasn't never been like terrible, just off the wall, right? I've always been in okay shape. But I feel like, what, I can sleep better and I can eat better. Those are two things I can improve upon. So I just started like studying, like, hey, what am I doing? What am I not doing? I'm not getting the fiber. I feel like my macros are a little out of balance. So I'm just looking at better ways to put my meals together. My wife is a huge support. She cooks at night and she makes great meals. Every time I say, hey, can we do less of this and we do more of this because this is a little bit better for us? She's like, sure. She changes it immediately. And so that's really good. But anyway, back to my point is like, I was kind of like a white belt in nutrition. I was just kind of like guessing. So I'm trying to get better at that. It's okay to be a white belt at something. That's how you grow, is like start off. It's like I suck at jiu-jitsu podcast, like suck at something. It's okay to suck at something, because once you admit that you suck at it, you can only go up and be better. So back to the takedowns. I know I go all around the roundabout talker here, but it's okay to be a white belt in takedowns. It might even be something exciting. Maybe you're a guard puller and you already have okay sweeps. Maybe you don't, whatever. Be like being on your back better. But that might be something that maybe you get in a rut and a plateau and you say, hey, I'm kind of stuck here. I'm bored of the jiu-jitsu. I need to find a way out. Then that's a good way to switch gears. A good segue. Maybe I'll start working on takedowns. And they can beat up the body a little bit, but that's why I think you got to learn the right moves, learn from the right people, because there are definitely some high percentage takedowns that are low impact that really don't beat you up that much. And you can drill them. The great part is you can drill them effectively where it doesn't beat your body up. And then you don't take as much trauma as you see, like when you watch good wrestlers like clashing and banging heads, and you don't have to take all that trauma to still be good at takedowns. And then stick with simplicity. I'll kind of wrap it up with that, is just that, basics, like basic takedowns. Example is like a takedown that, I even show in my instructional. I literally still use almost every practice. And in the last couple of tournaments, I competed in Memphis and then Nogi Worlds, and there was one takedown I hit a couple of times that I still teach. People know it's coming. I still hit it. And it's just like, because that's back to that 90-10 rule. It's like I focus 90% of the time on the 10% of the takedowns that I think work for everybody. And then that way you don't have to like really clutter your jiu-jitsu journey by being like, oh, Kyle's like good at takedowns, so I have to learn 20 takedowns. No, you don't. You only need like 3, you know? So anyway, that was a long answer.
Is there any course that's 40% off for the whole month of March that would be good for someone to simplify their takedowns?
I mean, here's the thing. There is something I'm aware of, okay? And it has a great name. It has a great name. Okay.
What's the name?
STDs for BJJ.
What does STD stand for?
STDs for BJJ. I always want to give people STDs for BJJ. And that is simplifying takedowns for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So,
but once they simplify them, they can't get rid of them, huh?
That's right. Once you simplify and you have these takedowns in your arsenal, they will never go away. You'll always have it. There is no cure. But in all seriousness, I feel like that was a body of work that I was proud of. Not because like, I'm the worst salesman ever. It's funny. I was telling people Junior sells more rash guards to people in my gym than I sell rash guards in my gym. But anyways, so if Junior watches this, he'll get a crack out of that. I don't try to like, I'm not a great salesman, but I do believe it was a strong material that I put together. I put a lot of time and thought into it. And I do wholeheartedly believe it in the sense that I showed stuff that I still literally use every single week. And I still compete as a black belt. And granted, it's masters, but man, there's some tough guys in my division for sure. And I can still take a lot of them down. And I don't do fancy takedowns. It's not this like 8-hit combo that like, then I finally get them down. It's usually like a one quick fake, one quick setup, and that's it. So I really believe the material I put in there, not because you just doing the talk. I walk the walk as well. So,
man, that's good stuff, Kyle. Thank you for being on the show.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. I'm glad. Anytime we can chat a little bit together, I always get some good laughs. So I'm looking forward to our upcoming road trip.
I am too. That's going to be fun. And that is the episode. I just wanted to thank you guys for watching this one, listening to this one. Glad Kyle was able to come on. I haven't had him on in a while. And honestly, that's been one of the biggest things, like people to come back. In the beginning of the show, I was really focused on getting big name people and having them do interviews. But when it came to how hard it was to get these people and what they brought to the table, not that they didn't bring great stuff to the table, but they didn't bring much differently than people who are my friends that I have jiu-jitsu conversations with all of the time, like Kyle Watson. And what's happened over the last 2 years, more people have requested Kyle coming back or my dad coming back than pretty much anybody else on the show. And it's just because I have that good relationship with them. And so we have already have very deep jiu-jitsu discussions. So that is why we're kind of going back to me interviewing my friends again, which is really how the podcast started and really what I want to do on the podcast. So hope you guys are enjoying those interviews. If you guys ever have anybody that I should interview, I always love to hear those recommendations. You guys can send me an email, josh@simplifyingjujitsu.com, or you can send me a message on Instagram at the Josh McKinney. And I would be happy to hear from you guys. Or if you want to just drop some encouragement, if you have found that this is a helpful show to you, I really, really, really appreciate the encouragement. It's really cool when people that I don't know tag me on Instagram or something saying, hey, I'm listening to this show. I'm listening to this episode. I think probably there are a lot of content creators that are big enough to where that doesn't matter to them. I'm not one of them. And it really does. I was in Indianapolis this weekend and people were coming up to me and talking to me about my show, people that I don't know. And to me, that is the most fun about doing this show. And so, as always, I really appreciate you guys. I hope that today's episode was helpful. I hope you guys laughed. I know I laughed a bunch while recording it, and I even laughed while re-listening to it. And most importantly, I hope today's episode helps you guys suck just a little bit less at jiu-jitsu. Have a great day, guys.